I mean, it's possible that we live on a planet in the middle of the universe where objective right and wrongs don't exist. And humans, because that's a scary concept to grapple with, we have to invent an entity that tells us, no, it's okay. There is a right, there is a wrong, there is a heaven, there is a hell, there is a good, there is a bad. Because us existing in this limbo where an action is relative and I have to use my best faculties and culture and those around me to make the best decision is terrifying.
Sure,
That doesn't mean that if the answer that religion provides is
sure. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. But what you're going to have to also acknowledge is there's another possibility. And that possibility is I don't want anybody telling me what's right and wrong. Because you see, I grew up in a Catholic background. And I got sick and tired of the Pope and priests and nuns telling me what was right and wrong. So I just jettisoned the whole idea of God and religion because I want to do my thing my way. In fact, I'm an American, which means I'm free, which means don't you dare tell me what's right and wrong. You see, moral relativism is the quickest way to deify my own opinion. The moral relativist is God, plain God, meaning by that, I am deciding what is right and what is wrong. And that's the quickest way I know to deify my own opinion. And ma'am, there's not a human being I know who's not tempted to do that. I certainly am tempted. I resent, at times, God telling me what to do. I want to do my own thing, my own way. That's all I'm saying.
You have to be given the right circumstances and the right biology to be able to make that choice, right? And unfortunately, not everyone acknowledges that there are biological differences in the brain that, I mean, we can point to through medical advances. So I'm going to point to something that's kind of just obvious to the naked eye, which is in order for you to be gay, to choose someone of the same sex, right? You have to be one sex fully. And I'd have to be female and choose another female to have sexual intercourse with. What happens when you're born with both a penis and a vagina? How do you make the morally right choice to choose the opposite sex when you're born with both? And the reason I bring that up is because, I mean, there are women who've been phenotypically female who've been born with XY chromosomes, or if you look in the brain of, one sex, you find, instances of the other. So what would you do in that case?
Okay, if a person is born with both a penis and a vagina, I do not know exactly what they should do. I would encourage them to consult good doctors, have appropriate surgery, but obviously that is a birth defect. So I would turn to medicine to help me straighten out the birth defect, and then I would start making decisions based on that.
Which way would you straighten it out for us?
I do not know. I have never been confronted by that decision, and no friend of mine has ever been confronted by that decision, so I've never been put in a situation where I've had to defend that position. Just off the bat, off the top of my head, what I would say was I would trust whatever the person decides in consultation.
How do they know that they're making the morally right decision in the eyes of God?
Ma'am, if you have a birth defect, what you're going for is health. And whatever you choose when it comes to either being male or female in your sexual organs, because you've been born with both, you make the decision. Pray, ask God for wisdom, if this child is your child, and then make the wisest decision you're able to.
What if I'm terrified that if I make the wrong decision, I am punished for it eternally? And prayer is not enough. I need an answer from the Bible.
But you see, the reason that thinking is so horribly wrong is because the Bible never says that. See, that is my problem with a lot of people.
Or, okay, let's say, or I'm going to be criticized by my community, possibly ostracized. I think it's Missouri, possibly, where 40% of homeless are gay. So I want to know, what would I do? And prayer is not enough. I need to be told by, I mean, if you're willing to make commands as to what people should do and tell them you do these things or else you're socially, communally ostracized, in this case, I need an answer.
Oh, okay. Well, I can settle that one very simply. I pastor a church up in Connecticut. The church where I pastor, we love all people. Many of our people struggle with pornography. Others of our people struggle with adultery and fornication. Others of our people struggle with homosexual sex. We don't ostracize anybody because we all understand we're all sinners and we all are in desperate need of the grace of God. So we don't socially ostracize anybody. We respect and love all people regardless of the decisions they make in their life. To tell you the truth, we have a lot of folks in the church where I pastor who've been in prison for some horrible crimes. We don't ostracize those people. Instead, we acknowledge we all are broken. We all have a sin problem. You express sin one way, I express it a different way. It doesn't matter. We're both sinners in desperate need of God's grace.
So what it seems to kind of keep coming down to is that you don't know, you won't judge, we can't know what happens after life, but for some reason you take a very strict stance that being gay is wrong religiously. And it doesn't, I feel like it's kind of like a cognitive dissonance. You can't say that it's wrong and then say, oh, well, we won't punish, we won't ostracize. We actually don't really know if it's wrong and if you'll really be punished. We just believe it's wrong with no foundation for believing that it is, especially when science contradicts it.
How does science contradict that?
The fact that it makes it a moral conundrum. It makes it impossible for a person with both genitalia to make the right decision.
All right, my gay friends do not have both genitalia.
But right, because
Okay.
that's gay. That's different from being born with both. And again, this is a body part that you're able to point to. Your gay friends, if we were to put them under fMRI, we would see certain portions of the brain that are enlarged. It would be similar to someone that is female. We might see higher levels of estrogen.
Yes.
So the reason I point to the genitalia, so that's something that us mere mortals can see with a naked eye. That seems to be the only thing that we believe in. But if science says, no, look, I can show you images, it doesn't matter. And so that's why I'm even starting with the most blatant, obvious one. I'm not saying your gay friends are born with both genitalia. Mine aren't either. Not that I'm aware of, at least. So, yeah, again, I guess the question comes back to, we don't know the morally right decision, so how can we have such a harsh stance that it's the wrong thing to do?
All right. What is the purpose of life? There is no purpose to life if there is no God. Life is a crapshoot. It's ultimately meaningless.
Have you ever studied existentialism?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Camus and Sartre and Nietzsche say exactly what I just told you. That's why Camus points out the only question modern man must answer is, why not commit suicide? Because there is no God, life is a crapshoot, it's ultimately meaningless.
Well, that's nihilism. I mean, he ultimately does say that we can find meaning in those we love and in the frivolities of life and being able to, you know, walk by and see a beautiful flower and appreciate the astronomical odds that you're even alive and you get to enjoy that. But that meaning that I derive from life is one that I do ultimately have to find for myself. And I do think that the atheists have done kind of a terrible job of ushering the next phase of atheism, which is really providing guidance for those who don't believe and finding a way to find fulfillment, because I think that's where the religious have got it hands down. I mean, it's impossible not to feel a religious sensation when I walk into a church and there's the light shining in at just the right angle and the choral music. I mean, I get goosebumps and I have a religious experience. We don't provide that to ours, which I'm hoping will change. But I don't think you need a dictate from some institution to tell you to have meaning.
I agree 100% with that. You don't need a dictate from some religious institution to know what's right or wrong. You're absolutely correct. I agree 110% with you. But if morality is objective, there has to be a moral lawgiver, God. Because if there is no God, then obviously the moral lawgiver is the government, King Arthur, the culture, or the individual.
Or science, I think, can actually be a moral lawgiver in a way.
Or what?
Science. It's imperfect, but we can say what's healthy and what's not, looking at medical, right? Physical nutrition. We can make objective facts about what is, and I'm stealing this, by the way, from The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris, which basically says that just because we have different opinions about what is moral because of science doesn't mean we know nothing about what is moral. So same with health. Though some might say being a meat eater or being a vegetarian is better, just because we have different concepts of good doesn't mean they can't be peaks within the moral landscape. Knowing what we know, if anything, helps to better human well-being. we can measure that scientifically. If I hit you with a hammer and you bruise and you're in pain, that would fall less on the spectrum of morality, because I can measure through science that you're in physical pain.
Tell that to my dentist.
I don't. I don't
Ma'am,
know. I don't know.
it's an issue of who are you going to trust to tell you what is good and what is not so good. So, ma'am, it's very simple. There is no way scientifically you can prove to me that he has value or that he's worthless.
Why have you interrupted me, started calling you ma'am, and quit talking to me?
Pardon?
You've quit having a discussion.
No, I have not quit at all. I'm making a very salient point to you. It is impossible, as you said, to scientifically prove something is right or wrong, whether a human being is valuable or invaluable. It's impossible to scientifically prove that he is worthwhile or that he's worth less. That is not a scientific question. That is a philosophical question. It's a religious question.
I would disagree.
All right, we strongly disagree. Science is a study of process, physical process. Science has nothing to say about a value of worthwhile or worthless, of justice or injustice.
What about pain or negation of pain?
That's a physical experience, pain.
Does pain translate to value in some way?
At times it does. That's why I asked you about your dentist. My dentist, when he hits my tooth with a hammer, he hurts me. But guess what? It is hurt designed to heal me of the cavity.
Right.
So, like it or not, science doesn't tell you whether it's good or evil, right or wrong. Science is the description of process, how the physical organism works. When you start talking about value, worth, justice, now all of a sudden you are out of science into philosophy, theology, religion. It's that simple.
How do you measure, if not for science, how... With justice, right? What makes something more just than the other? Is it
Great
by
question.
God?
Great question. Ma'am, the only reason it is unjust for me to hold back and slap him is because he has value.
Is it because he would also feel pain?
No. He has value.
Nothing to do with it.
He has value. Why? Because he is not a bag of chemicals. He's a human being created in the image of God for a purpose. Because he has purpose, because he's been created by God with innate value, it is unjust for me to take this gift of a hand that God has given me and rake it across his face. You take God out of the picture, and you're up a creek without a paddle when it comes to explaining why there's a value of justice that is being violated when I rake my fist across his face. No, if there is no God, it's all relative. And if I choose to pull out my wallet and feed him money, give him money for lunch, great. But if I choose to haul back and slam him, great. It's my choice. Because morality is relative, and that's what Camus, Sartre, Nietzsche pointed out so well.
I do think the post-relativist model has left a lot of people lacking, because it did kind of end off with this, everything is relative, therefore we can't know anything objectively. And I think that's where the atheist movement has conceded over a lot to the religious movement, because even scientists, I mean, everyone will say, well, it's not our place to make a moral decision because we're afraid of backlash from academia. But the truth is, if you were to smack him, it would elicit pain. And we can measure to some degree that pain. And I think that starts to warrant why we decide whether something is just or unjust. And it has to do with where it falls on the spectrum of human well-being. If you are increasing pain, then you're moving farther away from that peak within the moral landscape.
Okay, good. So, obviously, I'm standing here saying, logically, rationally, it makes no sense to say there is no mind prior to the human mind who defines right and wrong. The human mind creates right and wrong, but there are moral absolutes. That is irrational. It is self-contradictory, ma'am. It's that simple.
I don't think there's absolutes, and that's, I think that's what makes it really difficult to come from religion over to atheism, is that I came from Catholicism. And the biggest thing for me was not having the black and white. This is right, this is wrong. I had to develop a sense of nuance, which even now is still really difficult to contend with. Sometimes something can be both right and wrong. Sometimes something can be painful and be bettering me. So if I go to the gym and I'm working out and
You
I'm in
bet.
pain,
Right?
but I understand it's still leading me to a life of greater satisfaction, not just acute pleasure, which is why I'm not a proponent of hedonism, right? Sorry, what was the comment or question back from that?
My comment was, it is illogical to say there is no mind prior to the human mind, which means obviously it's the human mind who creates right and wrong,
Sure.
and therefore there is objective morality. No, no therefore. If the human mind creates right and wrong, then it's your mind, her mind, his mind, my mind, your mind, and none of us have the right to say, I am right and you are wrong. No, I have to say, from my perspective, this is right, but from your perspective, it's wrong. I'm not correct, you're not incorrect, I'm not right, you're not wrong. It's all relative.
I see. So we're going back to kind of like the ego and how everything outside of us is perception, right? So right and wrong is our perception. There is no right outside of us unless, in your opinion, it would be unless there's a God that tells you. There's no other way for us to objectively know what is right or wrong. Is that a correct kind of summation? A little bit?
No, that's incorrect. What I'm simply saying is, if there is no God, it is impossible for there to be an objective right and an objective wrong. If there is no God, it is the individual or the culture or the power elite that define what's right and wrong, which means right and wrong are totally relative depending upon what culture, what power elite, or what individual you're talking to.
Do you think that this kind of gets into the uncanny valley a bit where, I mean, it's possible that we live on a planet in the middle of the universe where objective right and wrongs don't exist. And humans, because that's a scary concept to grapple with, we have to invent an entity that tells us, no, it's okay. There is a right, there is a wrong, there is a heaven, there is a hell, there is a good, there is a bad. Because us existing in this limbo where an action is relative and I have to use my best faculties and culture and those around me to make the best decision is terrifying.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that the answer that religion provides is
Sure. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. But what you're going to have to also acknowledge is there's another possibility. And that possibility is I don't want anybody telling me what's right and wrong. Because you see, I grew up in a Catholic background. And I got sick and tired of the Pope and priests and nuns telling me what was right and wrong. So I just jettisoned the whole idea of God and religion because I want to do my thing my way. In fact, I'm an American, which means I'm free, which means don't you dare tell me what's right and wrong. You see, moral relativism is the quickest way to deify my own opinion. The moral relativist is God, plain God, meaning by that, I am deciding what is right and what is wrong. And that's the quickest way I know to deify my own opinion. And ma'am, there's not a human being I know who's not tempted to do that. I certainly am tempted. I resent, at times, God telling me what to do. I want to do my own thing, my own way. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think what you're kind of creating a bit is a straw man, which is where you say, without a God, this is what people will do. And then you tear down that argument.
That is not what I did.
Okay.
You did not listen to me.
Okay.
I was not putting up a straw man. I was thinking logically through the issue.
This person that you claim to be, that you say possibly represents a large swath of humans, I would say is not necessarily true. And a majority of people, I think, would disagree. I think we all want guidance, but we've kind of grown up with this idea that to have guidance means we are going to go to communism, right? So soft paternalism, libertarian paternalism within a state, right? Even that we've seen it in the elections, that as soon as someone says, you know what, I think I can maybe help you make better decisions, I can guide you, people say, don't tell me what to do. But I think you'll see a large shift, given that a large majority of people my age wanted to vote for a candidate that believe that we need some sort of guidance, is showing kind of a mental zeitgeist. It's showing a shift that we understand that, I mean, 1 in 4 millennials is not religious. And I think we are suffering from kind of a cultural anxiety. We're coming to this conclusion that there is no God, yet where do we get our guidance from? And we know that we're in need of a guidance because we had it once. But I think to say that because there is no objective guidance, therefore the answer must be God is dogmatic and dangerous. I think we have to leave other options available, and really delve into the uncomfortable questions of philosophy and literature and culture, and come to those meetings. And yes, maybe we do need new institutions that help to guide us, but I think the blind faith one is outdated.
All right, fine. What do you think about Jesus Christ?
That's a loaded question.
No, it's not a loaded question. It's a sincere question. You've been listening to me. I've been listening to you. You just finished a nice monologue. You didn't ask a question, so I'm asking you a question. What do you think about Jesus Christ?
I think he had a lot of incredible morals that humans can look to and obtain guidance from. I think a lot of what he preached is something that belongs to humanity. I think humans had this ability to love, to forgive, to be brothers and sisters to one another. And religion really liked that concept and saw that it was capable of building a community. So they co-opted it for themselves and created an entire institution from it, and then said, unless you believe in my institution, you can't have these things. You can't be moral, you can't be good. I mean, morality and civilization predated Christianity. We have the capacity to be moral people. But, you know, Jesus kind of said it was his, and only with him can you do these things.
No, Jesus did not say that. Jesus had the utmost respect for the 10 Commandments, written 1,000 years before he was born, penned by Moses. Jesus did not say it all starts with me and it's all here. No. He was in total agreement with the 10 Commandments, Exodus chapter 20, written 1,000 years before him. What Jesus did point out is, all of us have broken the 10 Commandments. We have all rebelled against God. And he claimed to be God come to the rescue, to bleed and die on a cross, to forgive us, to give us God's grace, which would change us from the inside out, would transform us. And I can promise you, Mr. Trump, Mrs. Clinton cannot transform me. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party cannot transform me. It takes God. It takes Jesus Christ to transform the human heart. And that's what conversion is, the transformation of the human heart by Jesus Christ. And also, not only did Jesus teach a lot of good things, he claimed to be God. So if you respect him, you're in a real catch-22. Because if you respect Christ, he claimed to be God, which means he's either a wacko with delusions of deity, or else he is who he claimed to be, God in human form. Not only that, he claimed that his death was of ultimate significance. He claimed that he bled and died on a cross to save us, to do something for us that we cannot do for ourselves. And his resurrection 3 days later backs up his incredibly powerful claims. If you die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to everything you have to say. Jesus died, was buried, 3 days later rose from the dead, which gives him tremendous authority, credibility, trustworthiness.